I was returning from dinner at my son's house when I received a message from an unknown number. Don't forget to look around. My heart sank in shock. Was this a threat? I replied, typing with trembling fingers, but the response was surprising. This is salvation. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The pounding on my front door shattered the evening quiet like a sledgehammer through glass. 3 sharp, aggressive knocks that spoke of desperation and barely contained rage. Open up! I know you're in there! Jasper's voice carried through the oak door, pitched higher than usual, strained with something that made my stomach clench. I set down my coffee cup, the porcelain clicking against the saucer with unusual force. My reading glasses slipped down my nose as I approached the entrance hall, already sensing the storm that waited beyond the threshold. The moment I turned the brass handle, Jasper pushed past me without invitation. His clothes were wrinkled, sweat beading across his forehead despite the cool May evening. His hands trembled slightly as he ran them through disheveled hair, and his eyes darted around the living room like a cornered animal searching for escape routes. Dad, I need $150,000 urgently. The words tumbled out in a breathless rush. This is a matter of life and death. I closed the door with deliberate calm, watching my 38-year-old son pace across the hardwood floor like a caged predator. His breathing was labored, his movements jerky and unpredictable. Life and death? I crossed my arms, feeling the familiar weight of disappointment settle in my chest. Jasper, how many times have I heard this tune? You don't understand. He spun around, his face flushed with panic and anger. These people don't joke around. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily, marking the seconds of silence that stretched between us. I studied my son's face, noting the dark circles under his eyes, the way his jaw clenched and unclenched. This wasn't just another gambling debt. This was something deeper, more dangerous. And I'm not joking either. I kept my voice level, though my heart was racing. Enough. Time to get your head straight. Jasper's fist came down on the oak dining table with a crack that echoed through the room. The sturdy piece of furniture, a family heirloom that had survived 3 generations, absorbed the blow without so much as a tremor. But Jasper's hand came away red, and I saw him wince. You have no idea what you're doing, he hissed, cradling his injured knuckles. These aren't the type of people who accept late payments. I moved to my armchair, settling into the worn leather with practiced ease. The position gave me a clear view of Jasper as he resumed his frantic pacing, his footsteps creating an irregular rhythm against the hardwood. Tell me about these people, I said quietly. Jasper stopped moving, his back to me. For a moment, the only sound was the tick of the clock and his ragged breathing. When he turned around, something in his expression had shifted. The panic was still there, but underneath it was something harder, more calculating. Tony Castellano and his associate. They run operations throughout the South Side. His voice dropped to a whisper. I borrowed money to cover previous debts. And now you've dug yourself deeper than ever before. I finished the sentence with a sigh that seemed to come from my bones. Jasper, I've been pulling you out of holes for 20 years. Each time, you promise it's the last time. He approached my chair, dropping to one knee beside it. For a moment, he looked like the little boy who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares, seeking comfort and protection. But the resemblance was superficial. The eyes that met mine held no innocence, only desperation and barely concealed manipulation. This time is different, Dad. They gave me until tomorrow night. If I don't pay... He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. They showed me photos of what happens to people who don't pay. The weight of his words settled in the room like smoke. I studied his face, searching for truth among the layers of fear and calculation. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked once, then fell silent. $150,000, I repeated slowly. Where exactly did this money go, Jasper? His eyes shifted away from mine, focusing on a spot somewhere over my shoulder. Poker. High-stakes games in basement clubs. I was winning for weeks, Dad. I was so close to clearing everything, and then you lost it all? The familiar pattern was as predictable as sunrise. Plus more. Jasper's hands clenched into fists at his sides. You don't understand what it's like. The pressure, the calculations, the rush when the cards fall right. I'm good at this, Dad. I just need one more chance to... No, the word came out harder than I intended. I won't do it. Jasper's face transformed in the space of a heartbeat. The mask of desperation fell away, revealing something uglier underneath. His eyes narrowed, and when he spoke, his voice carried a venom I'd never heard before. You've always been selfish. All your love went to that company. I remained seated in my armchair, watching this stranger who wore my son's face. The grandfather clock continued its steady rhythm, indifferent to the storm brewing in my living room. I worked for you, for your future, I said quietly. For my future? Jasper's laugh was sharp, bitter. He began pacing again, his movements more aggressive now, hands gesticulating wildly. You don't even know when my birthday is. October 15th, I didn't hesitate. And I remember every gift you broke or sold. The truth of it stopped him mid-stride. His face flushed deeper, and for a moment I saw shame flicker across his features, before anger consumed it completely. That's right, throw it back in my face. His voice rose to a near shout. Every mistake, every failure, you keep a mental ledger of all my faults, don't you? I watched him move around the room like a hurricane, knocking into the coffee table, sending my evening newspaper sliding to the floor. The lamp on the side table trembled as he passed too close, his movements becoming increasingly erratic. I keep a ledger of love, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos surrounding me. Every time I picked you up from the police station, every debt I paid, every second chance I gave you. Love? He spun around, his eyes wild. You call control love? You call manipulation love? The irony of his words hung in the air between us. Here was my son, who had just attempted to manipulate me through threats and sob stories, accusing me of the very behavior he'd perfected. I shifted in my chair, the leather creaking softly. Jasper, sit down. Let's talk about this calmly. Calm? His voice cracked. There's nothing calm about having a target on your back. There's nothing calm about knowing that tomorrow night, if I don't have their money, they'll... He stopped, his hands running through his hair again, leaving it even more disheveled. Sweat had soaked through his shirt despite the cool evening air filtering through the windows. You'll regret this, old man. The words came out low, threatening. They settled in the room like a physical presence, making the air feel thick and dangerous. For the first time since he'd arrived, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Jasper moved toward the mantelpiece, where family photos stood in neat rows. His hand hovered over them for a moment, before selecting the silver-framed portrait of Mabel, himself as a young boy, and me. We were at Navy Pier, Mabel's smile radiant, young Jasper perched on my shoulders, all of us squinting against the sun. With deliberate slowness, he lifted the frame and held it at eye level. Maybe it's time you learned what real consequences feel like. The frame slipped from his fingers, or perhaps he let it fall. The silver frame struck the hardwood floor with a sharp crack, and the glass spiderwebbed across our faces. The sound seemed to echo longer than physics should have allowed. For a moment we both stared at the damaged photo. Mabel's face was bisected by a long crack, and Jasper's childhood image was fractured into 3 separate pieces. Get out, I said quietly. Jasper straightened, brushing imaginary dust from his wrinkled shirt. The gesture was almost casual, but I could see his hands were still shaking. You'll change your mind, he said, moving toward the front door. When you realize what you've done, you'll call me? I won't. He paused at the threshold, his hand on the doorframe. For a split second I thought he might apologize, might show some trace of the son I'd raised. Instead he smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. We'll see. The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows. The sudden silence felt oppressive after the storm of his presence. I remained in my chair, listening to his footsteps fade down the front walk, then the sound of his car engine starting and driving away. Only then did I stand and approach the broken frame. Kneeling carefully, I gathered the pieces, noting how the crack had separated us, Mabel on one side, Jasper and me on the other. The symbolism was so perfect, it felt intentional. The glass cut my finger as I lifted the largest piece, and a drop of blood fell onto Mabel's fractured smile. I carried the damaged photo through the house, turning off lights Jasper had left blazing in his wake. My footsteps echoed hollow against the hardwood as I made my way to the study, each step measured and deliberate. The house felt different now, as if his anger had left invisible scars on the walls. My study welcomed me with familiar warmth. Leather-bound books lined the walls, their spines catching the soft light from the brass desk lamp. Awards from Wells Tech Solutions gleamed modestly from their places among family photographs and mementos. This room held the accumulation of 40 years of honest work, careful planning, and measured success. I set the broken frame on my desk and poured 2 fingers of whiskey from the crystal decanter Mabel had given me for our 20th anniversary. The amber liquid caught the lamplight, and I found myself staring into its depths as if seeking answers. The wingback chair by the small fireplace received me like an old friend. From this position I could see everything that mattered. The photo albums on the lower shelf, the filing cabinet that held important documents, and the desk where I'd made the decisions that built our family's security. Mabel always said, "Urban, you're too soft with the boy." I spoke to the cracked photograph, her fractured smile somehow still radiant. If she were alive, she'd have stopped this madness years ago. I opened the family album, pages whispering as I turned them. There was Jasper at 6, gap-toothed and grinning beside his first bicycle. At 12, sullen in his Little League uniform after quitting mid-season. At 16, standing beside the car I'd bought him, the same car he'd totaled 3 months later while racing his friends. Each photograph told a story of potential squandered, of chances given and wasted. But there were other photographs, too, hidden behind these family memories. I pulled out a manila folder, labeled Jasper Financial Records, and spread its contents across the coffee table. Bank statements, receipts, check stubs, the paper trail of 20 years of enablement. My hands moved automatically, calculator clicking as I tallied the amounts. Car payments, insurance claims, legal fees, gambling debts. The numbers climbed steadily. 20,000, 50,000, 85,000, $137,462. The figure stared back at me from my notebook, written in my careful handwriting. Enough to buy a house, enough to fund a small business, enough to secure a comfortable retirement for someone who'd worked honestly their entire life. I sipped the whiskey, feeling its burn trace down my throat. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into evening quiet. Somewhere a television played, its laugh track drifting through open windows. Normal families living normal lives, probably unaware that their neighbor was calculating the cost of his own son's destruction. The wedding photograph with Mabel drew my attention next. We were young then, full of dreams and plans. She'd been a teacher, practical and wise in ways that took me years to fully appreciate. Even then, she'd worried about spoiling any future children. "Children need boundaries," she'd said during one of our late-night conversations about starting a family. "Love without limits isn't love. It's harm disguised as affection." I'd thought her overly cautious then. Now, sitting among the evidence of my failures as a father, her words felt prophetic. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows across the room. I remembered my own father, a stern man who'd taught me the value of hard work through example rather than handouts. When I'd wanted a bicycle, I'd earned it by helping in his shop after school. When I'd crashed his truck at 17, I'd paid for the repairs with my own savings. "You made a man of me, Dad," I whispered to the flames. What did I make of my son? The answer sat in the broken photograph on my desk, in the folder of receipts, in the memory of Jasper's cold smile as he'd threatened me in my own home. I closed the financial records with decisive finality, each paper sliding into its place with a whisper of resolution. The family album followed, its weight substantial in my hands. These memories would remain, but the pattern they documented would end. The grandfather clock in the living room chimed 10 times, its deep notes resonating through the house. Outside, the last of the evening joggers had passed, leaving only the quiet rustle of wind through the oak trees. I finished the whiskey and locked the manila folder in my desk drawer. The key turned with a soft click that seemed to echo with finality. Whatever came next, whatever threats Jasper might make good on, I would not bend. He was 38 years old. If he was going to learn responsibility, it would have to be now, in the hardest way possible. The broken photograph caught the dying firelight one last time before I turned off the lamp and headed upstairs to bed. The quarterly reports blurred together on my desk as I tried to force my attention back to business. 18 hours had passed since Jasper's explosive departure. 18 hours of restless sleep interrupted by memories of his cold smile and the sound of breaking glass. I'd arrived at Wells Tech Solutions at 9 sharp, hoping the familiar routine of profit margins and market analysis would cleanse my mind of family drama. The view from my corner office normally brought me peace, Lake Michigan stretching endlessly toward the horizon, the geometric precision of downtown Chicago's skyline. Today it felt like looking through prison bars. I adjusted the family photograph on my desk, this one intact, showing Mabel and Jasper during happier times at Navy Pier. The contrast with last night's destruction made my chest tighten. My secretary's voice crackled through the intercom, jolting me from my brooding. "Mr. Wells, your son Jasper is online too." The words hung in the air like smoke. I stared at the blinking red light on my phone, my hand frozen halfway to the receiver. 15 seconds passed. 20. The light continued its patient pulse, waiting for my decision. Finally, I set down my pen and straightened in my leather chair, preparing for another assault. "Hello, Jasper." "Dad, I want to apologize for yesterday. I was wrong." The voice was completely different, soft, humble, stripped of yesterday's venom. I gripped the phone tighter, searching for the trap hidden in those unexpected words. "This is unexpected, Jasper. Violet reminded me how much you've done for me over the years." His tone carried genuine shame, or a masterful imitation of it. "I let my fear control me, and I said terrible things. Will you come to dinner tonight, please?" I found myself writing dinner, Jasper's 7 p.m. in my appointment calendar before my rational mind caught up. The pen felt heavy in my hand as I watched the words appear on the page. All right. What time?" 7 o'clock. "And Dad?" A pause filled with what sounded like genuine emotion. "I'm truly sorry." The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone as if it might explain what had just happened. My son, who 24 hours ago had threatened me in my own home, was now inviting me to dinner with apologies and humility. I leaned back in my chair, watching afternoon shadows creep across the financial reports scattered on my desk. The numbers meant nothing now, just black marks on white paper, while my mind wrestled with possibilities. Either Jasper had undergone a miraculous transformation overnight, or this was the most sophisticated manipulation he'd ever attempted. The Chicago traffic hummed 23 floors below, a distant reminder of the normal world continuing its predictable patterns, while my family teetered on the edge of something I couldn't yet name. I touched the intact family photo again, studying Jasper's young face, before gambling had carved lines of desperation around his eyes, before money had become the only language he spoke fluently. My business instincts, honed by 4 decades of negotiations and deals, screamed warnings, but beneath the wariness was something more dangerous: hope, the treacherous possibility that my son had finally reached the bottom and was ready to climb back up. I glanced at my watch. 5 hours until dinner. 5 hours to decide whether I was walking into reconciliation or a carefully laid trap. The afternoon stretched ahead like a question mark, and I had no idea what answer awaited me in Wicker Park. The drive home through Chicago's evening traffic gave me too much time to think. Radio stations blurred together as I searched for distraction, finally settling on classical music that matched my contemplative mood. By the time I reached Oak Park, doubt had crystallized into certainty that something was wrong with Jasper's sudden transformation. My bedroom welcomed me with familiar order. Suits arranged by color in the walk-in closet, Mabel's photograph smiling from the nightstand, everything in its designated place. I stood before the mirror, adjusting my tie for the 3rd time, watching my own uncertainty reflected in my eyes. The navy blue suit felt appropriate, respectful but not ostentatious, showing I took the dinner invitation seriously without appearing desperate for reconciliation. I checked my wallet methodically. Credit cards, cash, business cards. My phone showed full battery, which I noted with the precision of a man who'd learned to prepare for every contingency. In my study, I paused before the telephone, weighing my options. Mabel's voice echoed in my memory. "Trust, but verify, Urban. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst." I dialed Martin's number, listening to it ring twice before his familiar baritone answered. Urban, everything all right? Martin, if I don't call you by midnight, check Jasper's apartment. I kept my voice level, matter of fact. 1247 North Winchester, Unit 3B. A pause. You want to tell me what's going on? Probably nothing, just humor an old man's paranoia. You got it. Be careful, Urban. I hung up and made one final circuit of the house, checking locks with unusual attention to detail. The security system armed with a soft beep. The housekeeper's note updated with my destination. Each action was methodical, businesslike, as if I were preparing for a board meeting rather than dinner with my son. The cracked family photo from last night caught my eye as I passed the living room. Mabel's face, bisected by that spider web of broken glass, seemed to watch me with concern. I touched the frame gently, remembering her warnings about being too soft with Jasper, too willing to excuse his behavior. Maybe you were right all along, I whispered to her image. Outside, my car waited in the driveway like a faithful animal. I chose the Buick instead of the Mercedes, modest transportation for what I hoped would be a humble evening. The keys felt cold in my hand as I settled behind the wheel, adjusting the mirrors with unnecessary precision. For a moment, I simply sat there, engine off, watching the sun set behind the oak trees that gave our neighborhood its name. Normal families were settling in for normal evenings. Homework and television, simple conversations over simple meals. When had my life become so complicated that having dinner with my own son required strategic planning? I thought about Jasper's voice on the phone, that unfamiliar humility. Was it possible? Could a man change so completely in 18 hours? My business experience said no, but my heart whispered, maybe, just maybe. The engine turned over smoothly, and I backed out of the driveway with the deliberate care of someone who suspected this might be a significant journey. Wicker Park was 35 minutes away through evening traffic, 35 minutes to either salvage a relationship or walk into whatever trap my son had prepared. As I turned onto the main road, leaving the safety of my suburban sanctuary behind, I realized I was about to discover which possibility awaited me. The converted brownstone on North Winchester looked tired in the fading daylight, its brick facade weathered by Chicago winters and neglect. I parked across the street, noting the contrast between this neighborhood and my own, urban decay creeping through the cracks, young professionals gentrifying block by block, old-timers clinging to familiarity. Jasper met me at the apartment door with an embrace that lasted a beat too long, his grip surprisingly strong. Dad, thank you for coming. It means everything. The performance began immediately. His smile was perfect, warm but not overeager, apologetic without being servile. Either my son had genuinely transformed overnight, or he'd spent considerable time rehearsing this version of himself. Violet's been cooking all afternoon, he said, leading me into the small living room where mismatched furniture tried to create harmony. She's so excited to see you. Violet appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her smile bright but strained around the edges. Mr. Wells, welcome. I hope you're hungry. The apartment revealed their financial reality in careful details. Carpet that needed replacing, a coffee table bearing ring stains from countless meals, bills stacked on the side table with glimpses of red overdue stamps. But everything was clean, and Violet had tried to make it welcoming with plants and family photographs. During dinner, Jasper performed his redemption with Academy Award precision. Dad, I've decided to quit gambling. Forever. I know how much pain I've caused you, and I want to make it right. That's wonderful to hear, son. I watched his face carefully, noting how his eyes didn't quite match his words. What changed your mind? Seeing you yesterday, realizing what I was putting you through. Violet helped me understand that I was destroying everything that mattered. Violet's phone buzzed against the table. She glanced at it quickly, her face paling. Excuse me, I need to check this message. Everything all right, Violet? You seem troubled. No, just work. Her laugh was too high, too quick. Principal wants teachers to review lesson plans over the weekend. But her hands trembled as she set the phone down, and I noticed she'd received 7 messages during our meal. For a teacher on a Tuesday evening, that seemed excessive. Jasper filled the silences with stories of his newfound perspective, each anecdote polished and unconvincing. He asked about my business with unusual interest, inquired about my health with exaggerated concern, reminisced about family memories with forced nostalgia. "Remember when we went fishing at Lake Geneva?" he said, refilling my wine glass. "You taught me patience that day." I remembered that trip differently. Jasper complaining about the early hour, abandoning his fishing rod after 20 minutes, spending the day sulking in the cabin. But I nodded and smiled, playing my own role in this strange theater. Violet grew increasingly agitated as the evening progressed. She dropped her fork twice, spilled water reaching for the salt, and jumped visibly each time her phone buzzed. When she excused herself to the kitchen, I heard whispered conversation, though with whom I couldn't tell. "She's been stressed about work," Jasper explained, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Budget cuts, you know how schools are." I studied the apartment while he spoke, noting details that told their real story. Poker chips visible in a drawer he'd opened carelessly, empty wine bottles lined up by the back door, more than two people should accumulate quickly, a gym membership cancellation notice on the counter. "The meal is delicious," I said truthfully. Violet had prepared herb-crusted chicken with evident care, despite their obvious financial constraints. "You're lucky to have such a thoughtful wife." Jasper's smile flickered for just a moment. "Yes, she's very supportive." When Violet returned from another mysterious phone call, her wedding ring caught the light. She'd been twisting it constantly, a nervous habit that spoke of deep anxiety. Whatever was troubling her went far beyond lesson plans and budget cuts. "Mr. Wells," she said suddenly, "how do you... I mean, what do you do when someone you care about is in real danger?" Jasper's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Honey, that's a strange question." "I was just thinking about that news story," she said quickly, "the one about the missing businessman." But her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, and in that look I saw something that chilled me. Genuine fear, and a desperate need to communicate something she couldn't say aloud. I finished my wine and set down the glass with deliberate finality. "Thank you both for a lovely evening. I should head home." As I stood to leave, certainty settled in my chest like a stone. Something was very wrong here, and whatever it was, Violet knew about it. The cool May evening wrapped around me like a familiar blanket as I descended the steps from Jasper's building. 55 degrees, according to the weather app I'd checked earlier. Perfect for the 45-minute walk home through Chicago's winding neighborhoods. I needed the time to think, to process what I'd witnessed during that strange dinner performance. Wicker Park's trendy streets buzzed with Tuesday night energy, couples emerging from craft cocktail bars, young professionals grabbing late dinners at bistros with outdoor seating. The contrast with Jasper's cramped apartment and Violet's nervous energy felt stark. Here was the Chicago my son could have thrived in if he'd made different choices. I pulled my jacket tighter and began the familiar route toward Oak Park, my mind methodically cataloging the evening's inconsistencies. Violet's constant phone checking, Jasper's rehearsed stories of redemption, the poker chips I'd glimpsed in their kitchen drawer. My business instincts, honed by 40 years of evaluating people and situations, screamed that something fundamental was wrong. The commercial district gradually gave way to quieter residential streets. Streetlights became more sporadic, casting pools of yellow light connected by stretches of shadow. I passed a 24-hour diner where shift workers grabbed coffee, a closed bookstore with handwritten signs advertising poetry readings, empty bus stop benches waiting for tomorrow's commuters. At 9:47 p.m., 17 minutes into my walk, my phone buzzed against my chest. I stopped beneath a particularly bright streetlight, noting the unknown number on the screen. "Don't forget to look around you." I stared at the message, reading it twice before my fingers moved to reply. "Is this a threat?" The response came immediately. "This is rescue." Some psycho. Or kids playing pranks. I tried calling the number back, but got the automated message. "The number you have dialed is not in service." Years of business had taught me to document everything, so I screenshot both messages before sliding the phone back into my jacket pocket. But I kept it easily accessible. The next few blocks felt different somehow. Sound seemed amplified, my own footsteps on concrete, the distant hum of traffic, a dog barking somewhere in the darkness. I found myself glancing over my shoulder more frequently, though I told myself it was paranoia, brought on by cryptic text messages and family drama. Then I noticed the car. Black sedan moving slower than traffic warranted, maintaining the same distance behind me for 3 blocks. When I crossed at the light, it crossed. When I turned down a side street to test my suspicions, its headlights followed, cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes. My heart rate increased, and not just from the physical exertion of walking. Mabel's voice echoed in my memory. "Trust your instincts, Urban. They've kept you alive in business. They'll keep you alive everywhere else." The sedan crept closer, its engine purring like a satisfied cat. I could make out 2 figures in the front seats, though the tinted windows obscured their faces. My pace unconsciously quickened, muscle memory from childhood games of hide-and-seek suddenly feeling relevant again. Empty streets stretched ahead, residential blocks where porch lights provided minimal illumination. The contrast with Wicker Park's bustling energy was striking. Here I was alone with whatever intentions lurked behind those headlights. I turned down another side street, my business shoes clicking against pavement with increasing urgency. The car's turn signal blinked once, twice, before it followed me into the shadows. No longer coincidence, no longer paranoia. I was being hunted. The black sedan accelerated as I broke into what could generously be called a fast walk. At 65, my running days were largely behind me, but desperation provided motivation that my joints couldn't ignore. Behind me, car doors slammed with the finality of a judge's gavel. "Stop, old man, we just need to talk." The voice carried authority, mixed with annoyance, like a teacher calling after a truant student. But teachers didn't pursue people through dark Chicago alleys, and something in the speaker's tone suggested our conversation wouldn't be pleasant. "Police, help!" I shouted, though the residential street remained stubbornly empty. Porch lights stayed off, windows remained dark. Tuesday night in a working-class neighborhood meant early bedtimes, and minds focused on tomorrow's responsibilities. "Shut up and get him!" A second voice, younger and more aggressive. Heavy footsteps echoed behind me, gaining ground despite my best efforts. I ducked into an alley between 2 row houses, using parked cars and overflowing garbage cans as obstacles between myself and my pursuers. My chest tightened with each labored breath. The physical exertion combined with adrenaline created a dangerous cocktail for a man my age, exactly the kind of stress my doctor had warned me to avoid. But stopping wasn't an option when anonymous voices discussed getting me in tones that suggested violence. The alley opened onto another street, this one darker and more industrial. Loading docks and storage buildings created a maze of shadows and hiding places. I pressed myself against a brick wall, feeling the cold seep through my jacket while my heart hammered against my ribs. Where did that old guy go? He can't have gotten far. Split up. You check the left side. I'll take the right. Their coordination suggested experience with this type of work. Not random criminals looking for a quick robbery, but professionals executing a specific plan. The realization made my blood run cold. I spotted salvation in the form of an old storage building tucked behind a row of closed shops. The door stood slightly ajar, probably forgotten by the last worker to leave. With my pursuers' voices growing closer, I made a desperate sprint across the open space. "What do you want from me?" I gasped, though they were already out of earshot. The storage building smelled of motor oil, old wood, and years of accumulated dust. Garden tools hung from wall hooks, paint cans created small mountains in corners, and wooden crates provided perfect cover for a man trying to become invisible. I positioned myself behind the largest stack, struggling to quiet my breathing while my heart continued its frantic rhythm. Through the dirty windows, I could see flashlight beams sweeping the alley. My hunters had come prepared for a search operation, which meant this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Someone had planned this encounter, someone who knew my routine and predicted my walking route home. The shed door creaked ominously as one of them tested it. I held my breath, pressing myself deeper into the shadows behind the crates. Dust particles danced in the thin beam of light that penetrated my hiding place, and I fought the urge to sneeze. "Check in there." "Nah, it's locked up tight." Old man's probably halfway to Oak Park by now. Their voices grew fainter as they moved away from my hiding spot, but I remained frozen in place. Mabel had always said patience was my greatest business asset. Tonight, it might save my life. Outside, car doors slammed again, followed by the sound of an engine starting. I waited another 15 minutes, counting each second before finally allowing myself to breathe normally. Whatever was happening, whoever these men were, I was certain of one thing. This wasn't random crime. Someone had sent them specifically for me. Crouched behind wooden crates that smelled of decades-old paint and forgotten projects, I waited in the musty darkness of the storage shed. My heart had finally slowed to something approaching normal rhythm, though the tightness in my chest lingered like an unwelcome reminder of my age and limitations. Through the grimy windows, I could see my pursuer's flashlight beams sweeping the alley with methodical precision. Where did that old guy disappear to? The first voice carried frustration and professional annoyance. Maybe he managed to hide somewhere. It's pretty dark out here. The second man sounded younger, less experienced, possibly questioning the wisdom of this nighttime chase. I shifted carefully behind the crates, trying to find a position where I could hear without risking discovery. A paint can brushed against my elbow, creating a soft scraping sound that made me freeze completely. The flashlight beams paused in their sweep, and for 30 seconds that felt like hours. Silence dominated the alley. "Jasper won't pay us for nothing. We need to find him." The words hit me like a physical blow. Jasper, my son, the boy I'd raised, educated, supported through countless failures and mistakes, had hired these men to hunt me through Chicago's dark streets. The dinner invitation, the humble apologies, Violet's nervous behavior, all of it was orchestrated theater, designed to position me for this moment. "Forget it. He's already scared. We'll try again tomorrow." I covered my mouth with both hands, not trusting myself to remain silent, as the full magnitude of my son's betrayal settled into my consciousness. Every instinct screamed to confront this impossible reality, to demand explanations that could somehow make sense of a son paying strangers to terrorize his own father. Boss said just to scare him anyway, right? Make him think twice about refusing help to family. Yeah, but if we can't find him, how's he gonna know he was scared? They were moving away now, their voices becoming fainter as they searched other areas of the alley system. But I remained motionless, processing not just their words, but the casual tone in which they discussed my fear as a commodity to be purchased and delivered. The car engine started again, followed by the sound of tires on gravel as they drove away. Still, I waited another 15 minutes, counting each second while my mind wrestled with a new and horrifying reality. My son, the baby Mabel had nursed through fever, the child who'd run to me after nightmares, the young man I'd believed could still be saved, had crossed a line that transformed him from wayward son to genuine threat. When I finally emerged from my hiding place, the alley felt different. No longer just a route between destinations, but a battlefield where I'd learned that family bonds could be weaponized against love itself. The cool night air carried the scent of approaching rain, and in the distance the city hummed with its usual indifference to personal tragedies. Violet's warning text made perfect sense now. She'd known what was planned, had risked her own safety to warn a man she barely knew because her conscience couldn't bear watching. Murder disguised as family intervention. While her husband plotted my intimidation or worse, she'd chosen to become my unlikely guardian angel. I needed to call Martin, needed to involve police, needed to document everything before Jasper could construct plausible denials or eliminate evidence. But first, I needed to reach a place of safety, somewhere public enough that hired muscle wouldn't dare approach. The 24-hour diner I'd passed during my walk beckoned like a lighthouse in a storm, its neon sign promising sanctuary and witnesses. As I emerged from the alley and began walking toward those welcoming lights, I realized my son had succeeded in one goal tonight. He'd definitely scared me, but not in the way he'd intended. The fluorescent lights of the 24-hour convenience store buzzed overhead as I fumbled with coins at the payphone, my hands trembling so violently that quarters slipped through my fingers twice before I managed to dial 911. The young clerk behind bulletproof glass watched me with mild concern, probably assuming I was another late-night drunk having a crisis. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report an attempted assault. 2 men chased me through alleys near Wicker Park. I want to speak with Detective Martin Reyes at District 18. The operator's voice remained professionally calm. Sir, are you injured? Do you need medical attention? No, I'm safe now. But Detective Reyes is expecting my call. Tell him it's Urban Wells. 20 minutes later, Martin's patrol car pulled into the convenience store parking lot with practiced efficiency. Through the window, I watched him emerge, tall, solid, wearing the expression of a man who'd seen enough late-night emergencies to remain calm, regardless of circumstances. Urban, he approached with careful steps, noting my torn jacket and disheveled appearance. What happened to you? The relief of seeing a friendly face, someone trained to handle situations beyond my business experience, nearly overwhelmed me. Martin, I think my son wants to kill me. We sat in his patrol car while I provided every detail I could remember: the dinner invitation, Violet's nervous behavior, the warning text message, the black sedan that had hunted me through Chicago's dark streets. Martin took methodical notes, asking specific questions about timing, locations, and physical descriptions. You said one of them mentioned Jasper by name. Jasper won't pay us for nothing. We need to find him. I repeated the words exactly as I'd heard them. They were hired, Martin. My own son paid criminals to terrorize me. Martin photographed the warning text messages on my phone before the battery died completely. We'll need you to come to the station and make a formal statement. Can you describe the vehicle in more detail? Black sedan, probably a Toyota Camry. Illinois plates, though I only caught part of the number. Small dent on the passenger side. Tinted windows. 2 men, both appeared to be in their 30s. Within minutes, Martin had issued a BOLO alert through dispatch. The efficiency of police procedure contrasted sharply with the chaos I'd experienced just hours earlier. Here was order, system, the rule of law responding to criminal behavior with appropriate force. At District 18, the police station hummed with late-night activity. Radio chatter provided constant background noise. Phones rang with the persistence of urban emergency, and officers processed paperwork with the methodical attention of civil servants who understood that details mattered in courtrooms. Urban, that's serious accusation. Are you certain about what you heard? I met his eyes steadily. One of those guys said Jasper's name. They were hired by him. Martin's expression hardened. We'll find them. Your description of the car is detailed enough to work with. As I signed my formal statement, documenting every moment from dinner to discovery, Martin coordinated with patrol units, searching for the black sedan. The business part of my mind appreciated the systematic approach: evidence collection, witness statements, coordination between departments. But underneath the procedural calm, fury burned at the calculated nature of my son's betrayal. My phone, plugged into a charger Martin had provided, buzzed with a radio call. Detective Reyes, we have a vehicle matching the description parked outside an apartment building in Pilsen. Martin grabbed his jacket, adrenaline sharpening his professional demeanor. Urban, we may have found them. Radio chatter filled District 18 as Martin coordinated the arrest operation from his desk, surrounded by the controlled chaos of night shift police work. I watched through the window as backup units moved through Chicago's early morning streets, converging on an apartment building where 2 criminals waited, probably celebrating what they believed was a successful intimidation. Unit 47, confirm the license plate matches the witness description. Affirmative, Detective. Illinois Delta, Charlie 7219. Vehicle's cold. Suspects likely inside the building. The arrest took less than 30 minutes. Tony Marchetti and Vince Rodriguez, ages 32 and 29 respectively, were taken into custody without resistance. Both had prior records for assault and intimidation, professional muscle for hire, exactly the type of men my son would contact through his gambling connections. Martin separated them immediately, using standard interrogation techniques I recognized from television but had never witnessed in person. Tony broke first, probably calculating that cooperation might reduce his sentence. Urban, we found them, and we have a confession. I looked up from the police station coffee that had grown cold in my hands. What did they say? Listen, this Jasper Wells paid us $5,000 to scare the old man. Martin read from his notes, his voice carrying professional disgust, half up front, half on completion. They were supposed to make it look like random street crime. Scare? They wanted to kill me. Martin's expression grew grimmer. There's more. Jasper told them you have heart problems. Strong fear could have finished you without them laying a finger on you. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat down heavily in the plastic chair, feeling every one of my 65 years. My son hadn't just hired criminals to threaten me. He'd weaponized my own mortality, using medical information shared in confidence to orchestrate what would have appeared to be a natural death. He knew about my heart condition. The statement came out as barely a whisper. I told him last Christmas that my doctor was monitoring irregular rhythms. Tony's phone shows text messages arranging the job. Bank records will show Jasper's payment. We have enough evidence to arrest him for solicitation of assault, possibly attempted murder. Vince corroborated every detail of Tony's confession, both men realizing that their amateur hour criminal enterprise had crossed lines that carried serious prison time. They described meeting Jasper at a coffee shop near his apartment, where he'd provided my photo, my address, and specific instructions about using my heart condition to create a natural death. The plan was elegant, Martin said, reviewing their statements. Scare you badly enough to trigger a heart attack, then disappear. No physical assault, no direct murder, just an old man who died from the stress of random street crime. Evidence accumulated with the mechanical precision of professional law enforcement. Text messages between Jasper and Tony arranging payment. Surveillance footage from near the coffee shop showing their meeting. Bank records tracing money from Jasper's account to Tony's. My son had been thorough but not careful, leaving a paper trail that would satisfy any prosecutor. He's at home right now, Martin said, preparing the arrest warrant. Probably sleeping peacefully, assuming his plan worked. I asked to be present when they arrested Jasper, though Martin insisted I remain in a police vehicle at a safe distance. Some twisted part of me needed to see my son's face when he realized his carefully orchestrated murder had become evidence in his own trial. Martin, I need to understand something. I looked at the confession statement spread across his desk. How long does someone spend in prison for trying to kill their father? With his gambling debts and your testimony about financial motive? 15 to 20 years minimum. This isn't a crime of passion. It's premeditated attempted murder. As Martin and his team prepared for Jasper's arrest, I remained alone in the station, surrounded by the institutional sounds of justice processing criminal behavior. My son, the baby who'd once fallen asleep in my arms, had calculated the exact amount of fear required to stop my heart. The magnitude of that betrayal settled over me like a blanket made of ice. Dawn filtered through the police station windows as I dozed fitfully in a chair Martin had positioned in a quiet corner of the detective bullpen. The institutional coffee had long since grown cold, but the caffeine and adrenaline combination kept real sleep at bay. At 8 o'clock sharp, Martin returned with fresh coffee and news that would close this chapter of my life forever. Jasper's in custody, arrested at home at 6:30 this morning without incident. I straightened in the uncomfortable chair, feeling muscles protest from the night's activities. How did he react? Complete shock. He tried claiming innocence until we showed him Tony's confession and the bank records. Then he broke down completely. Martin settled at his desk, organizing paperwork with professional efficiency. He admitted to everything. My phone, fully charged overnight, buzzed with an incoming message. The unknown number that had saved my life? I'd almost forgotten about that mysterious warning in the chaos of arrests and confessions. I typed carefully, "Thank you for saving my life. Who are you?" The response arrived within minutes. "I'm Violet. I couldn't let him do this. You're a good person." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by questions. "Why didn't you stop him earlier?" I was afraid, but when I realized he was really going to, "I'm sorry." Through subsequent messages, Violet explained how she'd discovered Jasper's plan the day before our dinner, found herself torn between loyalty to her husband and basic human decency, eventually buying a burner phone to send an anonymous warning. She was filing for divorce and had already agreed to testify against Jasper in exchange for immunity. "She saved your life," Martin observed, reading over my shoulder. "That warning text gave you the awareness you needed to recognize the chase for what it was." The legal proceedings would be straightforward. Jasper faced charges of solicitation of assault and attempted murder. Tony and Vince would likely accept plea deals in exchange for their testimony. With confessions, bank records, and text message evidence, the case was prosecutorial gold. "I want to see him," I told Martin, one last time. The meeting took place in an interview room at the station. Jasper sat in orange jail coveralls, his hands cuffed to the table, looking smaller and more pathetic than I'd ever seen him. Gone was the aggressive manipulator from Monday night, replaced by a broken man who'd gambled away not just money, but any hope of redemption. "Dad, I was desperate. Those people were going to—" "You made your choice." I kept my voice level, businesslike. "I gave you everything, and you chose to try to kill me for more. It wasn't supposed to be murder, just enough to maybe, to stop my heart, using information I shared with you in confidence." I stood to leave. "You're no longer my son." Later that morning, back home with a police escort, I called my lawyer to begin the process of changing my will. Jasper's name would be removed completely, his inheritance redirected to charitable organizations and a trust fund for Violet's future. She'd shown more moral courage in one text message than her husband had demonstrated in 38 years. In my study, surrounded by family photographs that would need updating, I reflected on Mabel's wisdom. She'd understood Jasper's nature better than I had, warned me repeatedly about enabling his destructive behavior. If she were alive, she would have stopped this madness years ago through sheer force of maternal authority. The broken family photo from Monday night still sat on my desk, its cracked glass creating prismatic reflections in the morning sunlight. I placed it carefully in the trash, along with any remaining illusions about the son I'd thought I was protecting. Justice would run its course through proper legal channels. Jasper would serve his time. Tony and Vince would face consequences for their choices, and Violet would build a new life, free from the toxicity that had nearly consumed us all. For the first time in years, I could plan for the future without wondering what crisis Jasper would create next. Wells Tech Solutions would continue under new leadership, my wealth would benefit worthy causes, and I could finally live without looking over my shoulder for the next manipulation. Sometimes cutting toxic people out of your life, even family, is the only way to find peace. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.